Chad, what do you think about the Kentucky Wildcats? We won't see Patrick Tolles this year. He's transferred up to BC.
Yeah,
They missed
yeah.
the bowl game last year. We expected them to break out and at least reach postseason play in a weak Eastern Division, and they couldn't get it done.
Yeah, here's the thing. You look at their schedule. Kentucky to me is a little interesting. You talk about Tolles being gone. I'm curious to see how much of that, if it tends to come back and bite them. Stoops, for whatever it's worth at this point, he has to get this team to a bowl game this year, bottom line. And, the expectation was to at least make it to a bowl this last year to see some type of improvement. We didn't get there. So this year you're looking at that. You're talking about going to Florida. Last time they went down there to Florida, they gave them a run for their money, but Muschamp was the head coach. So we kind of write that off a little bit. You got South Carolina coming in, Alabama. They've got to go to Alabama. They turn around with Vandy October 8th. And they draw Mississippi State out of the West as well, which that's going to be an interesting transition without Dak Prescott as the quarterback. So they got to go on the road to Missouri, yet another new head coach. Possibly some new philosophies coming in there as well. Georgia comes on the road. This Kentucky team, I know Stoops has made some hires here in the offseason. They're trying to get this air raid attack going on the offense, but they just can't seem to get consistency at that quarterback position, and that's something that they've got to find. Tolles, as good as he was at times, he was just as bad this last season. So they have been able to get some decent runners back there, and they've got some guys that can create some space and make some plays. But I'm still interested to see how they recover. They lost Stamps. He went into the NFL. For what it's worth, guys, Kentucky's defense wasn't that bad at times last year. They were able to we saw some glimpses, but this is by far a team that's ready to compete in any major way within the SEC East. But this is the year that they've got to at least get 6 or 7 wins, or we could be talking about Stoops being on the hot seat.
Yeah, so with Tolles out of the way, Kentucky fans get what they wanted, and quarterback Drew Barker, much heralded out of high school. He threw 70 passes last year, 35 completions. New quarterbacks coach, new offensive coordinator at the Commonwealth, and Boom Williams, obviously a playmaker on offense for the Wildcats. So David, does Kentucky have a chance to break through?
I think they do, but just how much, it's been the last couple of seasons where Kentucky has started really well, but then it's been the last half of the season where they've just fallen apart. They've given Florida all they could handle 2 years in a row. So they play these good games early in the season, but they somehow just can't keep it up. And now, and Chad brought up, they have had good defenses, and that's what has kept them in games, but they lose 6 starters from that defense coming in, so they have to replace a lot of talent. And, Stoops is a defensive guy, so he's got the pedigree to, maybe step up and help that. But, these were guys he recruited, and when these recruiting classes were getting, impressive reviews from with recruiting services. So, he got to replace, and then I think 6 of the top 7 tacklers are gone, with the 6 starters. So there's a lot of talent to replace on that defensive side. But they're going to bring in Eddie Grand from the offensive coordinator from Cincinnati. He's going to probably bring in he was kind of a pro style background, but he's kind of mentioned that he wants to play a little, everybody wants to play a little bit faster now. So that's what he's going to try and bring to Kentucky. So, can they stop that late season swoon? Is there a different kind of mindset this spring that they're going into to help that with 2 years in a row that's happened? And we'll see what Stoops, he's got a lot of pressure on him, like Chad said, to step in and finally get to the bowl game. And they've lost to Louisville 5 years in a row. So this is a big, big, big year.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Grand comes in. He's their 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. Stoops is 12-24. It's kind of time for him to start winning. We mentioned Boom Williams, Dorian Baker, their best wide receiver. 2 really good players, but they don't have a plethora of players. It kind of starts and ends with those 2 guys making plays on offense. Mike, what do you see out of the Wildcats?
Yeah, Mark, I agree with both Chad and David. I'm not sure Kentucky really has a chance to move on up in the SEC East. I think Kentucky's issues are indicative of why playing in the SEC is so hard. Chad mentioned you can see glimpses of talent, and that's absolutely true. They do have glimpses of talent, but when you look at those late season collapses and the lack of consistency, that speaks to depth, and that's what separates a team that finishes 5th, 6th, or 7th in the East from the teams that win or finish in the top 4 of the West and finish in the top 4 of the East, is that depth. The ability to have players come in the third and fourth quarter. That's what Kentucky doesn't have. That's what's going to keep Kentucky from getting above that fifth slot in the East. They just don't have the depth. David talked about the mental aspect. They've had these 2 late season collapses, both of which ended with losses to Louisville. That's a big game up there. Obviously, it's bigger than basketball, but it still means something to the football fans. Chad, I think Stoops is already on the hot seat, and if they don't get to a bowl game this year, which I don't think they will, I think this will be the last year for Stoops in Lexington.
So even with a down Mizzou and South Carolina and a pretty soft non-conference schedule outside of Louisville, not thinking postseason play, huh?
I don't think they're going to beat South Carolina. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Vanderbilt's going to be better. That Vanderbilt-Kentucky game, I think, is always a toss-up. Mizzou, also a toss-up. If they win both of those games, I think they'll be looking at Louisville again as the game that determines whether or not they go to the bowl game. I just don't see them beating Louisville.